Hello and welcome to the two-man power trip of wrestling. I'm your host, JP John Poz. With me today, very special guest. He's worked for WWF, WCW, TNA. Of course, he's the COO over there at FITE TV, Mr. Mike Weber. Mike, welcome back. How you doing?
Pleasure to see you, John.
What is going on in your world? I know we'll get into some of the past, but what's going on in your world? I know FITE is killing the game right now, so to speak.
Well, or the game's killing us. I don't know. We're keeping busy.
Yeah.
We're doing a good 20 to 30 live shows a weekend, many of them wrestling. But we're also doing a lot of boxing. And most recently, we had the big Jake Paul fight. Just closed the deal yesterday. We're going to do the KO Plant fight at the end of the month of March. Right now, we're feverishly working on, I think we're going to have a total of about 17 shows from WrestleMania weekend, which I believe this will air before that. And it's the Impact New Japan show together. Tokyo Joshi, first time ever in the United States, but we all know that women wrestling from Japan is quite popular world around. Of course, we have the Ring of Honor event. And we have a host of events from GCW, highlighted by Joey Janela's Spring Break, I believe it's 7, and Bloodsport. Those are two of the bigger shows, and but we also got the DDT show, Effie's Big Gay Brunch from GCW. So we got some pretty cool shows coming on that weekend there, and of course we're going to be there supporting it with our event center, where we'll be interviewing the participants and getting a flavor from the crowd from the various venues around LA that's holding those events. GCW is going to be at the Ukrainian Cultural Center. Ring of Honor is going to be on the Galen Center, which is on the USC campus. The other wrestling events are going to be at the Globe Theater, which is right down the street from the Biltmore, which is where WrestleCon's at. And of course, we'll be working in conjunction with WrestleCon as well. So a lot of moving parts, but this is about the fourth or fifth WrestleMania weekend that we participate in heavily. So we're quite excited about it once again.
FITE seems to be growing and growing. Of course, FITE Plus, and like we talked about on the Business of Business, you got the Fast channel as well. So FITE's on the up and coming. And not that they weren't already, but keep getting crazier and crazier over there.
I hope so.
So just to get into you, because I know Business to Business, we talked all about FITE and FITE Plus and the Fast, but I want to talk about you and really how did you get into the wrestling business? Because if you look at you, you have history in the wrestling business dating back to the 80s, right?
Yeah, I did not get into wrestling because I was a big fan of it or I worked around it or gone even to shows. I knew very little about it. And of course, as we all know, the world was different in the 70s and 80s when it came to wrestling. It wasn't as widespread availability. I don't even remember ever seeing it on TV as a kid, but I grew up in the era in rural Ohio where you had 3 channels to watch, and that was it. Interesting tidbit about where I grew up at: Al Snow and myself were both born in the same hospital in Lima, Ohio. So
Wow.
we share a lot of commonality about growing up in that area. Our schools played each other in sports and so forth. I'm just a couple years older than him. I definitely don't look as good as him or as good a shape as him, but we're only a few years apart.
Right.
But yeah, so I didn't grow up around it. I have a master's in sports administration from Ohio University, and they had an internship opportunity. I had been working in college sports. I had worked for Davidson College and Ohio University in their sports information department, doing stats for games and stuff like that. And a guy named Basil DeVito, which I think a name a lot of people have heard through this business.
Yep.
I was one of the first people he hired and came as an intern working on WrestleMania 2. And I pretty much hit the ground running because I think I started probably 5 or 6 weeks before WrestleMania 2. And for the wrestling fans who remember WrestleMania 2, it was the first event to originate from 3 different cities. I worked at the second city, which was Chicago, also known as Second City, Rosemont Horizon, where part of my job was to outfit the NFL players they had there. I had to go, work with them and their agents to, make sure that we knew the right wrestling boot size and wrestling gear. So I had to, pull that together for them, and worked at the event. If you watch a show, you'll see this guy with black hair sitting ringside, and my job was to catch Refrigerator Perry if he fell out of the ring. Ironically, while a lot of people do know that Refrigerator Perry is in failing health, He's the only NFL player that was in WrestleMania 2 who's still alive. All the
Wow, I
rest
didn't
of,
realize that. Oh my God.
oh yeah, you really thought Bill Fralick, who was actually about my age, he died at 60 years old. Too Tall Jones, Harvey Martin, Ernie Holmes, they've all passed away. Who was in that? Bill Francis was in there. Sort of a little scary. You think about some of that event, but it was 37 years ago, and a great way to get started in the industry, learn it, and loving it. And um, yeah, God, it's going to turn into a morbid show here. Over the last couple of years, I've always been at WrestleMania. I always ran into Gene Okerlund, who was a good friend, close personal friend, as we always like to say.
Yes, yes.
My close personal friend, Gene
Yeah.
Okerlund, and we sit there and tell each other stories about what happened backstage at WrestleMania 2 because we worked together. He took me under his wing, and explained to me what the hell was going on in the business and stuff like that. And I missed those having a cocktail with Gene and talking about WrestleMania 2.
That's awesome. Mean Gene, yeah, the best, the absolute best. But with the fridge, that would be kind of scary though if you had to catch him. No, I mean, wasn't that kind of dangerous?
Well, here's the funny thing is now I'm a big football fan. Um, and the thing about Refrigerator Perry in 1985, I think it was the Super Bowl that he became the big star in, and
Yep.
this was '86, the year after. And of course, he was the one of the biggest names in the sport, and what he was a defensive tackle who they brought in for some goal line plays to run the ball up the middle, which is actually happens quite often now. And they're talking about how big and huge, and the reason they called it refrigerator, he only weighed like 295 pounds. My son played high school football in Florida, and they had kids who were bigger than Refrigerator Perry on their offensive line.
Wow.
And it's, now your offensive lineman, it's not unusual for guys being 330, 350, 360,
Yep.
380. So he was sort of a regular sized guy now. He'd be a little bit considered almost undersized, as hard as that is to believe.
Yeah,
So,
the fridge. Yeah.
yeah.
When you look at that though, and you're doing that, you'll do anything at that point because it's your job. Like, or are you questioning? Like, hey,
No, I
what's
wasn't
my role
questioning.
here?
I wasn't smart enough to know
Oh,
how crazy it was. No, it was fun. I was just soaking it all in. I always have been around the event industry, sports, basketball, football. Uh, Worked in baseball, ran track, played football, swam, coached swimming, coached high school track, all that. So I've been around sports and events. So I just loved it and just soaked it all in. This was just such a bigger scale, and it was a lot of fun.
when you look at that time period, I know you weren't like a huge wrestling fan per se, but the guy that everybody knows, a household name, he's on the cover of all the magazines, Hulk Hogan, the game changer, the Babe Ruth of wrestling, if you will. What did you think of the Hulkster? What did you think of the presentation? What do you think of the charisma? And did you have any, inner workings with the Hulkster?
Actually, I started working with him the second day on the job. We did a televised press conference to announce WrestleMania 2. Literally, that day was the first day I've ever rode on a train. First day I've ever been on a cab because, again, I'm just a farm boy from Ohio. I'm in New York City all of a sudden. Never been to New York City. I had driven there with my car, which I still remember. I had a flat tire on the way. I had to buy a new tire for $10, a used tire for $10, so I could get to Connecticut. Um, Probably arrived on Saturday or Sunday, and Tuesday we did a press conference. And he was great. He treated me fantastic. I knew who he was, but once I got past Hogan, I probably didn't know any other guys' names. And the charisma, and I had come from working in college sports, where I enjoyed working with the basketball players stuff, but they just didn't have that personality to turn on, for the media. Courtway Hogan. Hogan's a master. I don't think there's anybody quite the way he is who could just turn it on and really do it. And it was fun. It was a great uh, a great experience there for that.
Was he basically like when you're there, the backbone of the show? As he goes, the show goes. You know what I mean? Like, was that he was the focus of the show for you guys? I know not
Well,
technically WrestleMania 2 in Chicago, but I mean just in general in
oh, in
Atlanta.
general, yeah. I mean, he was the pace setter. And I started out as really within a month after WrestleMania 2 was over, I was the head of PR for WWE. I got that position there, which is a great job, director of media relations. And literally, what I did all day was pick up the phone. This before cell phones, before email, and people calling, "Hey, I'd love to get an interview of Hulk Hogan." My job was, "We haven't worked with you before. He's got a busy schedule. We'd be interested in Randy Savage or Jake the Snake Roberts." Now looking back, you say, "Well, God, everybody loved talking to Jake and Randy and stuff too." But they didn't. They weren't nearly as well known as Hogan then. But both of those guys were so willing to do any PR publicity, and Vince wanted them to, and that's how they built themselves. Then we just saved the really, really big mainstream media for Hogan.
When you look at it, did you wish you were in LA for Hogan Bundy in the cage?
I don't know. I got to tell you, working in, Ozzy Osbourne was there at WrestleMania 2 in Rosemont with the Bulldogs. Again, yeah, both of them have passed on.
Yeah. Yep.
But Claire Peller, does anybody know who Claire Peller is? You're not even old enough to remember. Wendy's "Where's the Beef?" This old lady has her thing in a commercial.
Yeah.
So there's some interesting people in that show there. But yeah, it was good. It was a good show.
When you are doing the PR, like you said, you're an intern to PR. Who do you interview with, like, to get that? Do you interview with Vince, or how do you get that position?
Now, everything there at that time, you can't remember, there was only 60 employees in the company at that time. When I started, they were in a Greenwich office, Greenwich, Connecticut. It was Basil DeVito who had contacted the head of the graduate program, went through OU, and say, "Hey, got anybody you recommend?" He recommended me. We talked on the phone. Away we go. And I credit him with everything and exposing me to all these different entities, within the business, everything from magazines, home video, video game. Yeah, we did video games, action figures, the toys, all that kind of stuff. So I got my hands involved in everything, which was a great way to have a base in the industry.
When you look at the popularity of the WWF, what do you kind of attribute that to? I mean, obviously the larger than life stars, Hogan, but do you contribute that more to like Hogan and the wrestlers, or do you contribute it to the Vince and marketing and things like that?
Is Vince and Hogan as a team working together? I actually had a lot of hands-on communication with Vince in those days, which I don't think anybody now could even imagine doing it. But I was in his office almost every day because anything I had Hogan doing, he had to approve and make recommendations on and stuff like that. So we had a lot of back and forth communication there, which was, I just took it for granted because that's the way it was. But now we look back on it, I can't imagine it happening anytime there at WWF, probably in the last 25 years, to have that type of internal communication. The other thing is, though, Vince, really, that's why I came in. He was just really completing acquisitions of the regional territories. And when we were there, when I started, we were doing 3 live shows a night. And at one point, for about a 9-month period there in the late 80s, we did 4 live shows a night. And just think about how many that is. Was it 28 live shows a week around the country? The coordination levels and everything. But what a great way to get your name of your company out there in the local markets where you had the local TV station that aired your show. They would come and do reports in media, and that's one part of my job, is dealing with the local media and giving credentials and so forth. And of course, back then, wrestling was so kayfabe, so you really had to make sure that nobody asked that it was fake. It was a very big concern at that time, and how we handled the press stuff. So it was a real challenging, yeah, but it was fun. It was busy, and it was good. But it was such a great way to get the WWF brand name out there.
Man, I was looking up a show from '89. It's actually a few shows. I was doing some things and looking up Hogan, and I noticed, okay, so he faces Boss Man in the cage in MSG. This is just one small example because there's a bunch of them I could put up, but it's MSG. He's at the cage. They sell about 20,000 tickets for the matinee. The night show, it's at Boston Garden. So, you go up to Boston Garden. that's the main event at the end of the show. Hogan Boston was the main event in the middle of the show. There, probably so they can get up to Boston for the main event. But that sold 15,500 tickets. So I was like, wow, doing the math, 35,500 tickets for the same match, two different markets, the same day. Like that's amazing.
Well, and part of it, one of the reasons you could pull it off, there was no social media, so nobody's reporting the results or
Right.
how it went and so forth. But yeah, back then, they did that for several years in the late '80s, doing those, Philadelphia, New York, Philadelphia, Boston double shots there on Sunday afternoons and stuff. Yeah, it was incredible. So yeah, a lot of those guys were working 8 days a week then, or doing 8 shows in 7 days a week.
Right. Felt like 8 days a week. Yeah, for sure.
It was.
When you're there and like that's going on, what's the PR guy like? Is it like you're inundated with people wanting? Because like if I say 35,000 tickets in one day sold for these two markets, I mean, it just shows you the popularity. So everybody was kind of jumping on board. I mean, wrestling became mainstream with Hulkamania really and Vince.
Yeah, it did. All the media wanted to get there. You didn't have to pitch it too hard to get them to come out, and we were a big story coming into town. Now, we always had local promoters, so a lot of time, I was obviously I wasn't at all these events. You're coordinating it remotely, and and you only did well at that point initially. There, we're only doing one pay-per-view event a year. We didn't start doing four pay-per-view events about '88. I think that's when that started, with the Royal Rumble and SummerSlam and all those events being added. And then, of course, as we all know, you got into the '90s, started going up to 12 a year. But so your focus was on those live events. And, that's where all the cash was made. It wasn't made on TV at that time. Um, you know, when we hit WrestleMania 2, you only had one other, actually, there's two other previous pay per view shows. So pay per view was not a revenue stream that you counted on. So it was all new, I mean, the old term, the business essentially operated out of a cigar box, cash in, cash out right there. Payouts to the wrestlers came straight out of the receipts from the box office. And it was just a different time and place, much simpler in that respect.
And it was almost like TV. They would pump up the house shows. So the TV was used to get you to go to house shows and spend your money on the tickets and the merch and the food and everything else.
Every 3 weeks at Poughkeepsie, New York, we go there to tape the weekly TV shows that were in syndication. And it was all about selling live event tickets at that time.
So given that you weren't like initially not like you hated wrestling, but you weren't a big wrestling fan, is that something that they liked or were they didn't like? Because I always hear that with like WWF, it's like they actually prefer if you're not a fan kind of thing.
Yeah, that actually was started about the time I came on there, that they did not want to hire anybody who was a fan. Uh, I don't know if I got hired because I wasn't a fan or because I have to have a background in live events marketing. That seemed to work out well. Yeah, it was important, and I probably helped hire 20, 25 people. I was there, and we most certainly did not want to find somebody who's a fanboy. All they want to do is become best friends of the wrestlers. And there was real division between wrestlers and the office or the suits, because back then we always wear suits and stuff like that. You walk into a locker room and a whole hush came over if you walked in there wearing a suit. Hey, kayfabe, the office is here, type of thing. And
Yeah.
so it was just a different time and place there. And unfortunately, because I wasn't a fan, I was able to work with the guys because I wasn't trying to be their best friend, but I got along with them all well, mutual respect. And many of the guys I still cross paths with, and feel are good friends. The Hacksaw Jim Duggins, the Ted DiBiase's, the Jake Snake Roberts. I've probably seen all those guys just in the last year, and we pick up where we left off, before. So yeah, it's fun, especially now looking back at it.
Did you travel a lot with the guys?
Uh, Pretty much only televised events. But there are a lot of times I travel with guys for media appearances. You might remember the Arsenio Hall show.
Yep.
Went to that show quite a few times. I was there with I was there with Bobby Heenan and Ted DiBiase. I think Jake Roberts, probably Randy Savage, Hogan. So I would go to those events with them. There's a couple times where it's like, I don't even know where we're going, but it's me and Hogan on a private jet going somewhere, Chicago or West Coast or something. I always think this Jets crash is going to be Hulk Hogan, plus three others, to
Yep.
not never to be named.
Yep.
Um, so there was quite a bit of that, and we also did PR tours. I remember Hacksaw Jim Duggan and myself, flying to between cities and doing two press conferences in the same day. I remember one being La Crosse, Wisconsin. That means the other one was probably like in Minneapolis or something like that. And we, be pretty much him and me doing the press conference. I'd introduce him, and he would, obviously he's fantastic talking to the media. And doing his check and stuff, and where we went, and that's how we promoted various events around there and get exposure. And again, there we had very strong relationships with our broadcast TV station partners in the individual market. We always called them our home team. We're the home team there because we had the local TV station, La Crosse, Wisconsin, for example, who made sure they red carpet treatment for us.
How is the relationship with the guys? Like, do they treat you like a suit, like you said, when you're one on one with them, or is it different when you're traveling Hogan or Duggan?
They treat me fine. The funniest thing is of Hogan. I worked with them at TNA most recently, and I've talked to him a few times since then, but not all that often. But at TNA, he always kept calling me the kid. Well, of course, by then I was in my 50s, and I go, Terry, you're only 5 years older than me, dude. Come on, not the kid anymore. So yeah, he goes, oh yeah, you young guys and stuff. I'm almost the same age as you, but yeah, they were great. I mean, again, looking back on it, some of it was like I remember the very first time. It was very common then, after televised events, that everybody go to the bar after the show. This is when we started doing the Saturday night main events, which were live on NBC, and that was the front runner before doing a lot of big pay-per-view events and so forth. And I remember the first guys I actually hung out and actually had a beer with, not much more than that, with the beer, was the British Bulldogs, who now, all the stories I've heard since then, I'm surprised how professional they were with me, because they've pulled every rib possible in so many other people. But I wasn't a
Yeah.
mark. I wasn't a
Yeah.
fanboy. I was just a fellow worker, another guy here trying to figure out the business. And both those guys treat me like $1,000,000. They're great to me. Um, so I never once had a problem. Never felt, but I didn't want to try. I wasn't trying to be the guy, you know, uh, hanging there and see how many shots I could do with them, or meet as many girls they did, or go to other clubs with them. I just want to, have a few beers after the show, like anybody does after work.
When you see something like today, I don't know if you saw this actually. When I saw it, it was a viral thing. It was the PR guy, and he's with Liv Morgan, and they're at an event together. Did you do that too? Like go to Knicks games and stuff? Like were you like front and center with them or no?
I was. I mean, I'm in, there's. I saw something just recently from it's when we opened the Nitro Grill, and I obviously remember me opening the Nitro Grill for WCW. They're in Excalibur Hotel in Las Vegas. Is actually my project. I remember us doing the press conference, but I didn't realize that it was all this video. It was DDP shared this video. It was him and Hogan, and I'm not sure, Roddy Piper, I think, was there. But there in the background, there I wasn't. Many shots. Sort of forgot about that. But yeah, I've seen that video you're talking about, and um, not to that extent, but yeah, I was around quite a bit. I worked very hard to stay off camera. That's sort of what I felt was my job. It was all about the talent. I want to be the star. I feel a little sorry for that guy. I don't know him personally at all, but I'm sure many, many, many times I was trying to have a conversation with somebody, and they probably ignored the hell out of me as well. So,
I was
um,
cracking up
yeah,
because it became viral, became a meme, all this other stuff.
yeah.
But she wrote back. She wrote like she had no
Oh,
idea what was going. She's not paying attention. She's not being rude. She just was paying no attention to anything. She was like, "Oh, I was in my own head." So she kind of made a joke out of it too.
yeah. I saw her response today, and I think she was as professional as possible in there, and didn't want to bury the guy. That's for sure. And
Yeah.
she did a good job with it. And yeah, it happens. It happens. Now, again, though, you got to remember about back in the '80s and even early '90s, there were no women involved in the program at all. Nothing like it is today. You know.
Oh, way, way different. So as you move along, did you always stay with the PR department at WWE, or did you do other jobs as well?
No, I say with PR the entire time as a WWE. We grew the department, hired a couple people underneath me. But what was good about it is we we just got involved in so many elements of the thing because we're so small. It's everything from how to promote a live event in a small market or a big market to how to license your merchandising. It was also I was at the NAPI conferences where you're selling a TV to broadcasters. So I was able to learn quite a bit about the business, still always being the PR guy. But it's like a master class of how to take a product to market.
If I were to say like daily duties, or what are you doing as a PR guy, 9 to 5, and I mean obviously the hours are going to vary, but like what's like the daily day look like for you in WBPR?
There was a tremendous amount of phone work. Uh, there was no other way of doing it.
Yeah,
There was no other way to communicate with people. Um, a lot of outbound calls to media to make sure they're set up for media credentials, any interviews you want, coordination. Now on the other side, again, it was really now looking back, I can't imagine how I did it, but and this is even before pagers, believe it or not. How I would contact wrestlers to get them the information that, hey, you need to call this radio station tomorrow morning. So I would call guys' wives at their homes, find them
yep.
on the road, find them at hotels. I'd work through the road agent to get a message to so and so, hey, honky tonk man, Jimmy Hart, you need to do this call, to or show up at this station and stuff like that in coordination. And now I can't imagine how I did it, but I know I did it because it got done. It was just a whole different way. And then, and getting, press releases out and stuff like that. We would sit there and, again, fax machines were just starting. So we did FedEx press releases to get the story out, to
Wow.
various markets and so forth. So yeah, it was a fax and a press and a press release, or just plain mailing them. We did a lot of mailing. We mail out the cards and stuff. So you got to think further advanced than people today drive me nuts. Email the event information the night before the show. So
Yeah,
uh,
what good does that
and,
do? Yep.
and with fight, I deal with that now. Some people is like, just like there's a weigh-in this afternoon, and we only got notified about the weigh-in this morning. So we're
Wow.
supposed to air it, and
Not
we're
good.
airing it. Actually, I think it's in about 2 hours here. We're airing a weigh-in, but people just don't think as far in advance as we had to back then. We had no choice but to.
So how come you left WWE, and when did you leave?
So, as you know, your wrestling history, WrestleMania 4 and 5 was in Atlantic City with the Trump Plaza.
Yep.
It was actually in the convention center, but Trump Plaza was the host and presenter of the event. And I got to know the people at the Trump organization very well. A gentleman named Bernie Dillon and Mark Edis were the two executives that we dealt with there at the Trump. And I went down there, did a lot of um, pre-event marketing, planning, and stuff for WrestleMania 4 and 5. The very, very, very first, we didn't call it fan access, but fan um, meet and greets and stuff that were done there. I think it was WrestleMania 5's first time that was ever done. I know at WrestleMania 5 we have 5K run on the boardwalk and stuff.
And
So
breakfast with the Bushwhackers. Yeah.
yeah, all those kind of things. I was that's one of my projects and directions, doing all the legwork on those, and pre-event press conference, post-event press conference. So I built a real good working relationship with the Trump people there, and essentially then I left WWF to go work for Trump in Atlantic City, and a little bit reason leaving. I was very happy working there, had great people and stuff. Wasn't super fond of raising my daughter at the time. I just had one child at the time in Stamford, Connecticut. We actually lived within walking distance of the current WWF office right now, and not the greatest place to be living and raising kids. Yeah, again, I'm a Midwest guy. You know, we're living in a little apartment there, and my daughter's walking by burned out cars to go to elementary school every day and stuff like that. And it is, so now, if anybody's ever been to Atlantic City, uh, you work in Atlantic City, you never lived there. I lived in
Right.
Summers Point, which is about
Yes.
15, 20 minutes away from there. It was a good experience working for Trump in Atlantic City, focused mostly on boxing, almost entirely on boxing, but we also did some stuff, powerboat racing. We did Rolling Stones concerts and stuff like that. So to continue on the big event business. And it was a great experience until they opened the Trump Taj Mahal, where they were losing like $1 million a day, and they start making cuts. And the division I worked with was called Trump Sports and Entertainment. I was the marketing manager for that, and that ended pretty quickly after a year of being down there.
Damn. I try to do too much, I guess. Trump. Too many experiments down there with Taj Mahal and everything else.
Well, yeah, and doing the casino business there, it was tough. I mean, it's a seasonal business there in Atlantic City. Of course, again, hard to imagine now, but at that point in time, this would be like 89 and 90. There's only two places you could gamble in the entire United States. It was Las Vegas and Atlantic City. That was it.
Yeah.
There was no riverboat gambling yet, no Indian reservations. Now, geez, I mean, I live here in Ohio. You go up to downtown Cleveland, they got casinos on downtown Cleveland, which I still can't comprehend.
Yep.
So
Crazy.
different. Yeah.
And Jim Ross famously called Stamford, Connecticut, an overpriced hellhole. So, so he
Yeah,
feels your
him
pain.
and me have talked about that a few times over the years. Guys, wasn't
I,
our
I
favorite place.
I figured that. So, how did you get into WCW?
So after I left Trump, I actually worked in um, motorsports for 2 years out of Chicago, company which is now called Feld Motorsports, doing monster trucks and supercross.
Oh
I
yeah.
was doing
Yep.
PR for that and marketing and so forth. And there's a woman named Sharon Sadello who I got to know while I was at Trump. She was a Viewer's Choice, which is now known as In Demand,
Yep.
the pay per view company. And we were doing a lot of boxing events and stuff, and have built a working relationship with her. She left Viewer's Choice and went to Turner, um, and ran pay per view for WCW. And she contacted me and asked if I wanted to come back into um, the wrestling world. And I was very interested in those Chicago winters are getting a little cold. And Atlanta was a pretty attractive place to move to. And so I went to, and I was following it and saw that WCW hired Jesse Ventura and said,
Yep.
okay, these guys are making a commitment to this, because I had worked with Jesse at WWF, unbelievable talent to work with. Um, and so I went there in 1992 to go work at WCW as head of PR initially.
When you do go there, do you think it's a step down from WWF, or you're not even thinking about
No,
that? Like,
not at all. I can't really remember. There's maybe a few wrestlers I knew from WWF, but hardly anybody. But it was still wrestling. In some ways, it was it was different. It wasn't as big as WWF, but it wasn't a little two bit organization. I worked in CNN Center. Now, I rode the elevators with Ted Turner and Jane Fonda. I've seen Desmond Tutu going down the escalator from interviews he was doing at CNN. So it was a pretty cool place to work with. Turner's at that time was a very hot organization to be working for. So yeah, no, I didn't see it that way. And we did our weekly TV, so it really worked very comparable. Like I said, there's a few people. The one guy who made it easy to come in there is a name that people have heard before is Jim Barnett. I knew Jim Barnett very well at WWE. In the first year and stuff, I'd be giving him rides home because we worked in Greenwich. We both lived near each other in Stamford, so I knew him. And you know, first week I was on the job, Jim took me to lunch, and first person we met was Ted Turner at the country food kitchen there, right down the street from the CNN Center, right there with everybody
wow.
else. Um, so again, having a few people I knew when I got in there, and Sharon, who had brought me in, I had known through boxing. So no, it was a great way to get started, hit the ground running, do what you can, and a lot of parallels. So yeah, it was fun. It was good.
When you look at the WCW organization, like obviously they are the number two, But were you paid as good as WWF or equal, the same? Like I know you're kind of doing
Well, I
around.
was a pretty, I was more on the entry level, but yeah, the pay was very fair. No problems, very comparable. The positions I was at WWF. I mean, I started as an intern, so
Right.
you're only going to go up.
Yeah.
But it was very comparable. Again, they had very budgets were just fine to work with and stuff like that. You weren't pinching petting stuff. It was not like you're running an independent wrestling company that a lot of our friends do run now, where you got to watch things so close. So it was again, we're part of a corporate organization there on television network, so it was comparable in that respect.
What were your some like roles and responsibilities in WCW?
Well, mostly as PR at the beginning, and just picked up where I left off there. Dealt with a lot of the same media people at WWF, but one thing I was just telling a story the other day is somebody, oh, did you get along with Vince Russo when you worked with him at TNA? I go, yeah, got along great. But I first met Vince or talked to him when he was Vicious Vincent on local AM radio in Long Island, New York.
Yeah, in like
Uh,
1991, right? Yeah.
yeah, before he went to WWF, and he would call to get wrestlers on his radio show and stuff like that. So dealt with a lot of local media, and again, email, cell phones just weren't part of your business life at the way it is now. Back then, also a lot of just basic communication there. We did, start touring internationally there. I did not do any international tours at WWF in the 80s, and they really didn't do any. They did some appearances, but WCW there by the early 90s was doing tours and pretty interesting ones. Couple crazy stories from that is story a lot of people like telling or hearing about is Sid Vicious and Arn Anderson getting in a fight and stabbing each other.
Yep.
I was there for it,
Oh my God.
um, and the whole recipe of how it got there is just like it was a surprise. Everybody didn't stab each other. Everybody had been going without sleep, drinking, traveling the world for a couple days before that actually happened. I'll set it up. Did a pay per view down like I think Biloxi, Mississippi, somewhere like that. At morning after, flew to Atlanta. Flew from Atlanta to London. Took a bus from London to Cardiff. Did a wrestling show in Cardiff. Got back on the bus and then drove to Blackburn, which is where the stabbing happened. All along there, everybody's drinking, no sleep,
Ooh, figure that was
planes,
it.
going to after the show, drinking the bus, going to the bar. As soon as we got to the hotel there, and I had just gone to bed, and all of a sudden I got the call from the front desk, and hey, Mr. Weber, can one of your wrestlers got in a fight? Can you come down to the lobby? The first person I saw was actually Vader, Leon White, covered in blood. And I thought, oh, geez, what happened? And and of course, he wasn't. He was trying to break the guys out,
Yeah, yeah. Yep.
And of course, he's in his white underwear out there, covered in blood. It was quite a sight seeing Leon there. And Leon was a good guy. He was a peacemaker. He always tried to be the peacemaker. And yeah, it was interesting. And then the craziest thing as a PR guy, I had to deal with the media because they all obviously don't want to come there. I had to make sure very much that nobody knew we were associated with Turner Broadcasting because Ted Turner happened to be in the country that day in the UK. And
Wow.
so we
Wow.
tried to keep, I know we're just some wrestling company from Georgia, stuff like
Yeah.
that. So,
Yeah.
World Championship Wrestling. So it was a very interesting experience there. And that was a kickoff to a very long tour that we did, with all other kind of things that happened on it. And if it wasn't that tour, the next tour after that is the tour where, Mick Foley lost his ear and
Yeah.
the ring, the
The ropes. Yeah.
rope buckle there. And I think he was wrestling Vader. And, and Michael Capetta, who was the ring announcer, said, brought it backstage, goes, well, here's here's his ear. What are we supposed to do with that? I go, I don't know what to do with the ear, and The other thing too, which is I remember from that actual show, is as the last show of the tour in Germany, and we were all just beside ourselves. Things we barely made through it. There's many stories from that, but the main event was Rick Rude against Davey Boy Smith, and they had decided to go to the gym together that afternoon, which was almost unheard of even in that time.
Right.
And they run a car and drove themselves. Was pissed off a few people because everybody's supposed to ride on the bus, but then the rules were starting to go out the window, but they made it there right before a show, and that sort of raised a few eyebrows internally that the two were driving together.
Got to keep kayfabe. What are you guys doing?
Well, probably the best kayfabe story on that is there. I took the first phone calls, from New Jersey media when the Sheik, Iron Sheik, and Jim Duggan got caught, in the New Jersey Turnpike, I think it was.
That was a huge. I'm a Jersey guy, so it was a huge story here. Yeah,
it was a major, major story, absolutely, and it was. People were more upset that the two were traveling together than that they were pulled over and found, I think, joint. I don't think it was coke. Maybe it was just joints.
I think it was weed.
Yeah, I think it was just weed, and people were more upset about that. But speaking of Jersey, another being right place, right time, wrong place, wrong time, whatever is also one of the reasons that Trump Sports I was working for closed down, is Mark Taffet, who I originally mentioned, who was the president of Trump Taj Mahal, was in a helicopter crash coming back, which you may remember, October of 1989. And they're coming back from a boxing press conference I was supposed to go to. I decided that morning not to go to because I was also working on a powerboat race at Trump at the time, which was taking all my time. And it was Vinny Pazienza, Hector Camacho press conference in New York City, which I was the lead marketing guy on that event. And only the week before, I was on a helicopter with Mark's wife, and one of the guys who died in the helicopter was on. I had done a trip to New York just the week before, so that hit pretty close to home. And at that time, my wife was 9 months pregnant and didn't know if I went to New Jersey or to New York that day or not. So took the first phone calls again on that one from the media, being a PR guy. So being a PR guy, I dealt with more tragic things you can imagine there, with deaths and stuff like that. More to think about it. It's just like you got to be on your toes for it. You got to make sure you say the right thing.
It's almost like you deal with more negative than positive a lot of the times.
Well, I worked with monster trucks. I had a monster truck go out of control event and killed a guy who was in the pit area who wasn't supposed to be there, and I had to hop on a plane next day to meet with the media. A death of a spectator at an event is a pretty major news story, and this was Niagara Falls. And actually, 2 days after I did that press conference, I actually resigned to go work for WCW. That's not the reason I resigned. I'd already been offered the job 2 days before it, but that was sort of my parting gift. And to make it even worse, you want to tell morbid stories, 2 weeks after that, that same company had another guy die at an event in Baltimore that we had to deal with the media. And that was one of the performers. How they have stunt coordinators, and the stunt that they coordinate with the guy, they accept completely wrong. And so very quickly how it was, they had a stunt where they had this transformer robot shoot lightning bolt, and they had a guy playing like an alien on the ground on the field. And when the lightning bolts were hit, they had charges supposed to come out and look like he got shot. Well, the guy who's the stunt coordinator, put the loads in backwards, and the guy took like a shotgun blast to the stomach. And they had him in a hospital emergency room with 2 minutes after it happened, because it's right down the street there in Baltimore Arena. And initially I thought he was going to be all right, but then he died a few hours later. So that all happened within like 2-3 weeks. And so I I was planning on giving my notice on Monday, so I had to wait till Wednesday because, well, I had to deal with that Niagara Falls fatality. And then I gave my 3 week notice, and that happened 2.5 weeks later
Wow.
before I left. So I had 2 fatalities in the last 3 weeks for it. So I was pretty glad to get out there. I said, okay, uh, I go to pro wrestling. They'll just beat the hell out of each other, I guess. So.
Although there's some crazy tragedies in wrestling too,
Well,
unfortunately.
there
Yeah.
has, and unfortunately, I haven't. Can't say I've actually dealt with any. I hadn't. I mean, there's been some, the um, Owen Hart, um, um,
Benoit, Guerrero. Yeah, there's been a
yeah,
bunch.
Benoit and Guerrero. I knew all those guys. I worked with them all, but fortunately, I was not with WWF when it happened to Owen. But I was at WCW, and we were doing essentially the same stuff with Sting the next day, which
Yeah.
we obviously canceled. Benoit was a neighbor of mine down in Peachtree City. I used to run by his house every morning, my morning run. I knew his kids and stuff like that. And Eddie, I'd known just being a great guy at WCW, but I did not work with any of them at that time that they actually passed away. But I had worked with all of them, and very sad, all three of them.
Man, yeah, just crazy some of the tragedies involved in the wrestling business. But back to like WCW, if I could, I wanted to ask, like, when did you like actually like depart WCW? When did you leave? Were you there until the end or no?
No, so probably in my second year or so, I got promoted to head of marketing there at WCW. So I was head of marketing. Great experience working with video games, and we when I first came there, we could barely put 500 people into center stage, which is still a venue that people use for pro wrestling. I think Impact was there as recently as January this year, and so we did our shows there at center stage, and then within 5 years, we were doing 40,000 in the Georgia Dome, which is quite accomplishment and feeling when we could barely figure out how to get a few hundred people to a show and doing 40,000. And that was not an isolated blip. I mean, we had done 30,000 at uh,
St. Louis.
we had done it in St. Louis, but we also had done it in the Superdome
Right.
too, where we had these large crowds. So we were ridiculously hot. We were selling out everything at the time, and of course the NWO storyline. And of course, I was having a field day. I was working with Gene and Bobby again. Bobby Heenan and Gene Okerlund and and of course Hogan and Savage and all these big names. Jake Roberts were all back in there. So it is quite a bit of fun there. Um, I was in charge of our licensing, and one of the things we did. I had a great team. Actually, the guy who ran licensing underneath me in marketing is a guy named Casey Collins, and who's now, he worked 6 years at WWE running all their licensing. But prior to that, he had been at Star Wars or Lucasfilms and done all the Star
Oh,
Wars stuff.
nice.
And now he's, I think, COO or a very, very senior position with Hasbro Toys. He's done quite well. So
Yeah.
he had a great start with us, and it's sort of fun seeing where guys have started and where they've gone. But we had a strong licensing program, and because I had a monster truck background, and because we were doing sponsorship in NASCAR, we all of a sudden got into the toy car business, and we were doing in NASCAR. It's still a big deal now, but back then it was a huge deal. Was replica cars, collecting them for all the race cars. And of course, we had a WCW car with Sting face on the hood and stuff like that. And but we had done a deal with Hot Wheels to create um, wrestler themed monster trucks. And of course, I knew the monster truck people. We actually then built real monster trucks and things. And listen, things were starting to slow down. This is summer '99, and things started to slow down. I didn't really know how long they're going to keep going with it, and you could see things are starting to change with Turner Broadcasting there as well.
Yep.
So I took an opportunity to go back into monster trucks and supercross. Um, I was the EVP of what was then known as Clear Channel Motorsports, where I did their pay-per-view events and licensing.
When you look at the marketing of WCW, were you like doing the NWO stuff and like their logo and that kind of stuff? Were you doing that?
I was reactionary.
Okay.
There's not one single thing, and nobody can tell you different. Oh, they planned it out months in advance or knew about it or all that kind of stuff. if they plan that thing out more than a few weeks in advance, I'd have been shocked to tell it. We didn't know as marketing people till things happen, which is fine. You react to it, and I think that's one of the reasons why NWO did so well. I mean, one of the first things we did, because I was in charge of the merchandising also, is, NWO was all about, being them taking over, the WCW. So, and then that, iconic NWO T-shirt, which I probably should have wore one for this call,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I still got a couple around. Was we actually had guys selling them out cardboard boxes a block away from the arena, like bootleg. We lived the gimmick. We supported the storyline, and stuff like that. And I think that's why it did so well, um, and it just made the shirt even hotter. We did stuff like that. I mean, there's one point in time, because you got to remember that same time period, the Austin 316 T-shirt came out too,
Yes.
and you could not find a blank black T-shirt in the United States there for a few months, because between WCW and WWE, we cornered the market.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. Big time.
yeah.
I think those are the
Pretty cool.
two hottest selling T-shirts of all time. I know Hulkamania too, but I think those are 1 and 2. NWO and Austin. I think Austin might be one.
I'd
NWO's two.
be shocked if there's anything above those two. While the Hulkamania shirts did really well in the '80s, there.
They weren't as mass produced as the NWO and
No,
Austin.
they weren't. I mean, and I'm sure WWE did, and I know I did with WCW. We had licensing deals, so it was sold in mainstream, Target and Walmart and everything else. You could buy NWO shirts everywhere. It was a hot commodity.
People are still wearing NWO shirts to this day.
I still will walk down the street and see somebody wearing them, and then but I also see the purple Macho Man shirts and so forth that we sold back in the '80s. People wearing them.
Yeah.
Now the big question I usually have: okay, is that original or is that a knockoff?
Right. Yeah.
But every once in a while, I'll find somebody. Yeah, no, this shirt is 25 or 30 years old. And of course, I have a couple of those.
I have a Hulkamania shirt somewhere over here. I mean, it's from when I was 7, so it's super small. But yeah, I
Doesn't
have the
fit you
original.
anymore, huh?
No. But I do have an original NWO shirt somewhere. Like I kept a lot of that the original stuff when I first got them.
Yeah, I have. I had quite a bit of stuff there, but we had a couple people on our team who were just like hugest fans, and I had some stuff. So I gave it to them, as sort of a bonus, or just sitting here collecting dust. You appreciate it maybe more than me. And matter of fact, there's a guy who worked for us, Joel Arkin, who handles our social media. I gave him a denim jacket. I probably only wore like once or twice, with the WCW Monday Nitro original logo all embroidered. And that jacket's got to be worth a couple $1,000s now.
Oh
And it's
yeah.
a beautiful jacket. And I gave him that, and I think he absolutely loves that jacket. So I think he'd appreciate it a lot more than I
Yeah,
would.
that's cool.
Yeah.
WCW versus WWF marketing, though. It seems like WWF is a marketing company that does wrestling. It seemed like WCW was a wrestling company that was like doing marketing. You know what I mean? It just felt like Vince is like obsessed with marketing.
Well, yeah. That was the difference there. With us, I mean, I'm sure you've heard stories about WCW. When they're doing those Monday Nitro shows, a lot of times they wouldn't have the complete lineup for the show completed to the second match of the show.
Right.
And that was sort of how everything was run there. You were reacting to what exactly was happening at that time, because things changed so quickly, and that doesn't really give you the best advantage of doing long-term marketing planning for video games, for example, which have about 18 months to 24 month from conception to market, to build the game and stuff like that, and things change and so forth there. So it's very difficult there. And yeah, and Vince always had more long-term planning. I mean, I'm amazed when we sat there in meetings in the '80s, and he gave us what the matchups were going to be to get to the next WrestleMania 6 months, 8 months in advance. And he goes, okay, we're going to go this direction, and he's going to be doing this and that. Very broad, no, but enough that we could figure out what the heck was going on, to know what the main events were, so what the roadmap was. WCW, we never had that, because it was much more booking it as it happened and how it was reacted to. So there's good ways to look at. They both had their positives and negatives of doing business that way.
So you also worked for TNA for a brief period of time. When did you work there and when did you leave?
It wasn't that brief. I worked 5 years. That was a long
Oh, I didn't
five
realize it was
years.
that long. Wow. Okay. Oh, so you had a
Yeah,
good run there. Damn, I didn't
yeah.
realize
I
that.
won't say it was it wasn't bad. It was enjoyable. I was there from 2008 to 2013, so that was a
Wow, I
very
didn't
good
realize it was
time
that
period.
long. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So good stuff there. Now the funny thing is, now we're doing 1.5, 2 million viewers every week. AEW right now would be killing to get those that many viewers for their shows.
Oh yeah. Yep.
And that was only 10 years ago. Things have changed that much in the industry.
Yep.
It was a very good experience. For me personally, it was tough. They're based out of Nashville. I was head of marketing. We had a whole marketing department, but I actually lived in Tampa, so I flew up to Nashville literally every week. And there was no reason to move there because we did our TV in Orlando. So if I lived up there, I'd be flying to Florida every week to Orlando. So I would, fly up on Monday morning, fly to Orlando Wednesday night, do TV on Thursday, Friday morning, drive to St. Petersburg where I lived, and do it all over again the next Monday. And it wore me out a little bit, but a good experience. Very hands on. It was very similar to actually WWE and WCW in their very early days. We probably peaked out as many as 65 office employees at one point. Um, but yeah, it was a good experience. A lot of good people I worked with there, and there was some people I worked with that for the Terry Taylor, for example. That was the third company I've worked with him at.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you did have people you worked with at multiple companies, and of course Hogan came in there, and Bischoff, and Kevin Nash, and Scott Hall, and all those guys, Booker T. All those guys I had worked with prior to that. So it was fun from my standpoint. And a lot of those guys, like Sting, I think I was the only guy he actually knew in the office, and he got to know at the office, so he appreciated that. And we have gotten along since I first started working with him in the early '90s. So it was good. And of course, now go to AEW show, and there's Sting again. I go, Sting, you do realize you're only 6 months younger than me? What are you doing flying off the top rope? He goes, oh, I haven't really learned that yet. Yeah,
He's in
so
crazy shape.
yeah. Oh, he's great. Yeah, no, he's doing real good, and it's been great going to AEW shows on Billy Gunn. These guys, what are they doing yet? They're still mainstay. Jeff Jarrett. I mean, I
Yeah.
watched his match that
Your
he
buddy
did
Jeff.
Revolution, in this past Sunday there, and I looked around there. He was in the ring. It was 8 men. The 4 different tag teams there, and I'm pretty sure there's nobody within 15 years of his age, maybe 20 of his age in the ring, and he was there right with them, looking just as good as all of them and doing great. Yeah,
And
it's fun to see that.
body wise he looks better than them.
Yeah, he does. Oh yeah, he's in better shape than most of those guys are. Yeah, yeah,
Crazy.
exactly. Yeah.
So as we hit the wind down here, we head towards the finish. It's funny when I started doing this about 8 years ago or so. Jeff was actually my first ever interview, and I just did the eighth
Oh,
year anniversary show, and he was a part of it. And he said, "Paz, I can't believe 8 years flew by like that." So it's funny, like how even me on my smaller scale, run into guys over and over again, and kind of
oh
get to
yeah,
talk to them many years later. Very cool.
yeah. It was. I went to AEW show about a month ago here in Ohio, and first guy I ran into, a guy named Steve Small. I worked with at TNA, worked with him at WCW, uh, head of operations there. And then the second person I ran into is Jeff Jarrett. It's like, here we are again, type of thing. So yeah, it's quite fun.
So when people say the name Mike Weber, what do you think is like the stamp of yourself, or what? How do you think people remember you? Like when they say, because you worked everywhere and you WWF, WCW, TNA, TBS, Monster Trucks. I mean, Trump. So what do you think they're gonna
Um,
remember Mike Weber for?
a little bit of right place, right time. Uh, I feel I don't have any enemies, which is sort of nice. um, I guess the thing is, I keep forgetting how many fortunate experiences I've had, and I just, what's happening to you, don't really think about it. But then you look back and say, oh, shoot. And I do have a reputation here with Fight. My company is there. No, they can challenge me and define somebody I don't know. Oh, yeah, of course I dealt with them. I mean, I'm doing a meeting tomorrow with a guy named Mark Taffet, you might know, formerly head of HBO Boxing. He interviewed me for a job for HBO in 1990. I turned down because I didn't want to walk through Times Square every day to go to work because they're right there
Yeah.
midtown.
Yep.
And we've lived in New Jersey because I was coming from Trump at the time. Well, the crazy thing about that is I have two kids who live in New York City who walk by the HBO building every day to go to their respective jobs. My son's a tax accountant, my daughter's a fashion designer, have offices and blocks of there. So
Wow.
how weird is that? But so
Yeah.
it's just you know I think I've taken networking to another level and enjoy every second of it.
So what's next for you and Fight?
Well, we continue to grow Fight. We're looking to go bigger and better. We're looking to expand beyond combat sports. We're working on some European football or soccer deals. I just got pitched a triathlon yesterday that we're going to think about maybe
Yeah,
airing.
interesting.
Maybe some Big Three basketball, which we actually have aired before. Who's owned by Ice Cube. So we're looking at other programming. We continue to. We're definitely a leader in the wrestling category without question. Very strong in boxing, very strong in MMA programming, and we just keep looking to get more and more bigger events and hopefully be the best partners we can with everybody we work with.
All right, Mike. Well, thank you so much for all the time. I really appreciate it. Thanks for coming on again.
No problem. I enjoyed it.
Awesome.